Okay, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're diving into one of Hercules' most unusual labors, maybe one of the least understood,
Well,
actually.
that's fair to say.
We're talking about the pursuit of the Ceryneian Hind, his third labor.
Right.
And when you think Hercules, you picture the raw power, right? Wrestling lions, clubbing hydras, just sheer brute force.
The monster slayer.
Exactly. But this task, it was almost the complete opposite. It wasn't really a test of strength in combat, not in the way we usually think of it.
That's absolutely right. And for this deep dive, we're drawing on, a whole stack of sources you've gathered, classical myths, historical mentions, even some later interpretations.
Yeah.
Our mission today really is to get beyond just the basic story. We want to unpack the nature of this creature because it is extraordinary and really dig into the challenge it presented. What did this specific task reveal about Hercules himself? Things we might miss if we only focus on the muscles.
Absolutely. And some of the details in these sources are genuinely surprising, even if you think you know the myths pretty well.
Oh, definitely.
We're talking about a female deer, a hind, but with golden antlers, like a stag.
Which is biologically interesting.
Right. And a chase that goes on for, what, over a year?
More than a year, yeah.
Then there's this direct face-to-face confrontation with two very angry Olympian gods.
Not something you want to provoke.
No. And the ending, it relies less on his strength and more on, well, respect for the gods, patience, and actually a really clever twist. It shows a different kind of heroism altogether.
So maybe we should start with the quarry itself, the Ceryneian Hind, because this wasn't just any deer you'd stumble across in the woods.
Not even close.
The sources really paint a picture of something mythical, unique.
Unique is putting it mildly. I mean, the first thing that just jumps out is the size. We're told this was an enormous female deer, a hind, but get this, larger than a bull.
Larger than a bull. That immediately tells you this isn't some normal animal. It sets it completely apart. It wasn't just nimble. It was substantial, powerful, visually striking just because of its sheer scale.
Yeah, imagine seeing that. It suggests it commanded a certain respect just by its presence.
Exactly. But then you add the features that make it truly fantastical. The big one, mentioned everywhere, is the golden antlers.
Right? The antlers.
And the sources specifically say antlers, like a stag's, which, as you said, is highly unusual for a female deer. And not just any antlers, solid gold.
Golden antlers on a female deer the size of a bull. I mean, the image is just beautiful, but also completely alien, isn't it?
It is. And that gold, it's not just decoration. It signals its divine connection, its sacredness, its preciousness.
Definitely. And there's more, isn't there? The hooves.
Ah, yes, the hooves, described as being made of bronze or brass.
Bronze or brass hooves. Imagine the sound of that running, a kind of metallic clatter through the forest.
Right, they wouldn't wear down. They'd give it incredible durability, probably contributing to its legendary speed.
And then there's the hide, not just plain brown.
No, described as a dappled hide, so patterned, maybe spotted, further enhancing this sort of striking otherworldly look.
It really sounds less like an animal and more like a living sculpture, forged from gold and bronze with this unique coat.
A piece of divine art, almost.
But it wasn't just for show. It had abilities. Speed, obviously. But one source adds something really unexpected.
You're thinking of a pindar.
Yeah. It snorted fire.
Yes, that detail is fascinating, isn't it? Adds this whole other layer of danger, this raw, untamed power, a beautiful, sacred creature that can breathe or snort fire. It defies easy labels, reinforces that this was a force of nature tied to the gods, not just a fast animal.
And its name roots it firmly in a specific place, the Ceryneian Hind.
Named after the river Ceryneites, which flows through Arcadia, maybe parts of Achaia too. Its main dwelling place is given as Cerynea, a region known for its wild, rugged terrain.
But it didn't just stay put, did it? The chase proves that.
Not at all. The sources mention it, ranging quite widely, places like the Peregian Hill, near the black pebbled Anorus River. Even before Hercules started chasing it, this hind seems to have commanded a pretty big territory. It was a dominant figure in the wild lands of the Peloponnese.
Okay, so size, gold antlers, bronze hooves, fire snorting, lives in a specific wild region. But the absolutely critical thing, the element that made this labor so dangerous and so different, was its divine status.
That's the key. Unanimously, emphatically, the sources state, this hind was sacred to Artemis.
Artemis, goddess of the hunt, wild animals, the wilderness, the moon. Not someone you want to cross.
Definitely not. She was fiercely protective of her domain, her sacred animals. To mess with something dedicated to her was basically asking for immediate divine punishment. Even heroes usually thought twice about that.
And there's one tradition, recorded by Pindar and some later writers, that links this specific hind even more directly to Artemis, and interestingly to Hercules' destiny.
Right. This is the story where Artemis herself is in Arcadia, near Eno, and she finds a herd of 5 of these incredible hinds.
5 of them.
5. 4 of them she harnesses to her own golden chariot, with golden bridles, no less.
Yeah.
They become part of her divine entourage.
Wow, imagine that sight. The goddess of the hunt, chariot pulled by 4 golden-antlered, bronze-hoofed beasts. That's pure divine power.
It really is. But here's the crucial part for our story. The tradition says Artemis purposely let the 5th one escape to Ceryneian.
Purposely. Not because she couldn't catch it.
No. Specifically, as the source says, to be a future labor for Heracles.
Whoa. Okay, that changes things. That's profound.
It implies the hind wasn't just generally sacred. Its existence in Cerynea, its eventual encounter with Hercules, it was all part of a preordained divine plan. Set in motion by Artemis herself long before the labors even began. It wasn't just some random animal he had to catch. It was the designated challenge waiting for him.
So his fate was tied to this creature from, well, almost from its creation, or at least its placement in Cerynea. And there's another layer of divine connection too, right? An inscription.
Yes, some sources mention an inscription, maybe on a collar, or even on the antlers themselves, saying, "Take and dedicated me to Artemis."
Taygete, one of the Pleiades, the nymph associated with Mount Taygetus.
Exactly. That inscription suggests it might have originally been a incredibly valuable sacred offering from Taygesite to the goddess. Just emphasizes again how untouchable this creature was meant to be.
Okay, so it's steeped in divine power, beauty, sanctity, but you mentioned a paradox earlier. One source says it chased farmers from vineyards. How does that fit with this sacred image? Seems a bit aggressive.
That detail, yeah, it's brief but important. It highlights that even though it was sacred divine, it was still fundamentally wild, untamed. Artemis protected the wild itself, that boundary between nature and human civilization. The hind chasing farmers. It suggests it was defending its territory, pushing back against humans encroaching on the wilderness. It embodies that tension, the sacredness of nature, but also its potentially dangerous, unpredictable side when humans trespass. It wasn't a pet. It was a powerful, wild being under divine protection.
And harming it carried enormous risk. The sources are clear: injure or kill it, and you face the swift and merciless wrath of Artemis.
Absolutely. And Apollodorus adds that her brother, Apollo, would likely jump in too. He says Apollo would have wrested the hind from him if Hercules had killed it or mistreated it.
So not just one angry god, but the twin archers, 2 of the most powerful protective Olympians, together.
Exactly. You're not just risking a fight, you're risking divine retribution.
Yeah.
Plagues, disasters, personal ruin brought down by angry gods.
Okay, so knowing all this sacred status, incredible speed, divine protection, the wrath of Artemis and Apollo hanging over it, why on earth would King Eurystheus assign this as a labor? Was he just trying to get Hercules killed?
Well, if you remember the context of the labors, they were penance for Hercules' madness. Yes, a madness by Hera. But Eurystheus, his cowardly and spiteful cousin, was the one actually assigning the tasks. And he was definitely calculating. He knew precisely how sacred the hind was. He knew the risks.
So it wasn't just a challenge, it was a trap.
Pretty much.
Okay.
It seems designed with 2 potential outcomes, both good for Eurystheus. Option 1. Hercules tries to capture it, inevitably slips up, maybe injures it accidentally, or just by presumption offends Artemis. Artemis then destroys Hercules. Problem solved for Eurystheus.
And he could even claim innocence, saying it was part of the god-mandated labor.
Exactly. Option 2 was maybe even more appealing to Eurystheus' cruel streak. Total humiliation.
Oh, sir.
Imagine the strongest man alive, the monster killer, reduced to chasing a deer he can't catch because it's too fast, and he can't hurt because it's sacred. It would be this endless, frustrating, pointless chase, draining his energy, breaking his spirit, proving his famous strength completely useless against something that just runs away. It was a test designed to show his impotence, to break him mentally.
That really adds a layer of psychological cruelty to it. It wasn't just go fetch, it was a mind game wrapped in a divine dare. But there was that one specific instruction from Eurystheus that changed everything, didn't it? It kind of saved Hercules from that catch-22.
Yes. The crucial bit, unlike the Nemean lion or the Hydra, Eurystheus didn't say kill it. The command was very specific. capture it, and bring it back alive to Mycena.
Alive.
Alive. That single word shifted the entire nature of the challenge. No combat. It demanded pursuit, endurance, cleverness, maybe even a delicate touch, a whole different skill set.
Okay, so the stage is set. This incredible creature, divinely protected, insanely fast, beautiful, but dangerous. And Hercules has to capture it alive, knowing failure could mean divine wrath or unending humiliation. Let's get into the labor itself, because this wasn't a quick fight, it was an epic.
It really was. The sources are quite clear on the duration. Hercules hunted this hind for more than a year.
More than a year. Just try to imagine that. 12 months plus some, day in, day out. Tracking, pursuing, maybe getting close then, poof, it's gone again. This wasn't just another task. It was a huge chunk of his life dedicated to this one relentless chase.
A true war of attrition, like we said, and over staggering distances. The geography mentioned is just incredible.
Where'd he go?
Well, he started near Anoe, probably in Arcadia, but the chase took him, potentially all the way up to Hyperborea.
Hyperborea, the mythical land in the far north.
That's what Pindar suggests. This land associated with paradise, distant gods. Then apparently back down south through places like Mount Artemisius in Arcadia, before finally cornering it near the river Ladon, another real river in Arcadia.
The sheer scale of that journey, it's mind-boggling. Across the known world, maybe even into the mythical world, and back again. Different landscapes, climates.
It emphasizes the hind's incredible stamina and range, but also Hercules' unbelievable commitment. He just kept going, following it wherever it led, no matter how far, no matter how tough the terrain. It really adds this geographical dimension to his suffering and his perseverance.
And like you said, this wasn't about his usual methods. No clubbing, no wrestling.
Nope. His legendary strength, largely irrelevant here. He couldn't just overpower it. It excelled in swiftness of foot. It was tireless, elusive. It never stood and fought. Its defense was pure motion. It just never let him get close enough for a nonviolent capture, like tackling it.
So this labor pushed him to his limits, but in a completely different way than, say, the Hydra did.
Absolutely. It demanded immense physical endurance, obviously, stretched over that whole year. But maybe more importantly, it required incredible mental endurance. Patience.
Yeah, the patience.
Imagine the frustration. How many times must he have thought, okay, this time, only for it to bound away again? He couldn't just lash out in anger. He had to just keep going. It demanded this relentless, unwavering focus against constant, demoralizing failure.
And this connects back to why he was doing the labors in the first place, doesn't it? The atonement.
Yes, he wasn't doing this for fame or glory. He was doing penance for killing his family in that fit of madness Hera sent.
So the nature of this labor seems almost fitting in a grueling way.
It becomes this profound test of character. It demanded restraint. He couldn't just shoot it down. Patience, on a scale we rarely see. Cunning, trying to anticipate its moves, trying to trap it. And piety, that constant awareness that this creature was sacred, protected by Artemis.
When you frame it against his guilt, his need for redemption, that year-long chase, it could almost be seen as a kind of meditative act, a physical manifestation of his penance.
Like a grueling form of purification.
Yeah, demonstrating his resolve, his dedication, even when the task seemed futile and was designed specifically to make him fail.
It really deepens his character, doesn't it?
Yeah.
He's not just a strong man. He's capable of sustained, non-violent effort, driven by this deep internal need for atonement. It shows a Hercules capable of introspection, focus, dedication over a long haul.
So after more than a year of this incredible pursuit, how did he finally catch it? The sources differ a bit here, right, as they often do in mythology.
They do. Some accounts are a bit less dramatic. They suggest he eventually just wore it down through sheer exhaustion. His and maybe finally the hind's.
Yeah, lasted it.
Possibly. And in these versions, he might have caught it in nets while it was resting, maybe near a river. This version really emphasizes his ultimate endurance and maybe his skill as a hunter using tools. Others simply say he finally ran it down, which implies his human stamina, pushed beyond all imaginable limits, somehow finally surpassed the hind's supernatural tirelessness.
Running it down after a year, that alone is heroic. Testament to incredible physical and mental strength.
It truly is. But the most famous version, the one most often cited, involves his archery skills.
The arrow.
Yes. In this account, he finally corners the hind near the river Ladon. That location comes up a lot. Just as it's about to escape, perhaps leap across the river, he takes a shot with his bow.
And this is where that capture alive rule becomes absolutely critical. He couldn't kill it. That would be disastrous.
Exactly. And the sources that tell this version are very specific about the purpose of the shot. It wasn't meant to be lethal. It
Right.
was aimed precisely to, quote, maim it, or as some elaborate, targeting a specific spot like the muscle connecting its legs or the sinew. The idea was just to wound it enough to stop it, to pin it down for a moment without shedding too much blood or causing a fatal injury, without violating its sacredness.
That takes unbelievable skill. I mean, shooting a moving target, sacred, fast, aiming for a non-lethal spot just to incapacitate it, that speaks volumes about his archery prowess, something we maybe don't focus on as much as the club.
It shows precision, control, a delicate application of force when needed. Not brute strength, but trained skill combined with immense restraint. This detail is absolutely key to understanding how he fulfilled Eurystheus' command while trying really hard not to provoke Artemis's full wrath. It was a calculated risk.
Hoping a temporary injury would be viewed differently than a killing blow.
Precisely. A gamble, really.
Okay, so he's done it. He has the hind. It's wounded, but alive. Sacred, but captured. But that wasn't the end of the story, was it? This act drew immediate attention.
You bet it did. The sources say Artemis and her brother Apollo showed up almost immediately, there by the river Ladon. It wasn't like they heard about it later. The moment Hercules laid hands on her sacred creature, boom, Artemis was there. Her divine presence and Apollo's manifesting powerfully.
And their mood. Not happy, I gather.
Not at all. Described as furious. The divine wrath was palpable. You can just picture it. Hercules, exhausted, maybe relieved, holding this incredible creature, and suddenly these two radiant, powerful, angry gods are bearing down on him.
Why so furious? I mean, he hadn't killed it.
From their perspective, he'd still trespassed. He'd chased, injured even non-fatally, and seized a creature sacred to Artemis, maybe even one from her personal herd, according to that one tradition. It was a violation of her domain, pure and simple. An act of disrespect towards her authority and the sanctity of the wild. In their world, mortals needed to show reverence. Hercules' action, whatever his reasons, looked like a major transgression.
Okay, so how does any mortal, even Hercules, talk his way out of that? Two furious Olympians, especially Artemis, known for her severity.
This is where Hercules shows that other kind of courage. Not fighting courage, but the courage of honesty and humility.
He didn't try to fight them or run.
No. The sources say he responded with characteristic honesty and courage. He didn't lie, didn't try to hide the arrow wound, didn't make excuses, he just owned it.
He told them the whole story.
Exactly. Humbly, he recounted everything. The madness Hera inflicted on him, the horrific result killing his family, the penance imposed by the gods themselves, the labors under Eurystheus. He stressed that this whole thing, the labors, it was itself a divine decree, something he was forced to do.
And his key point was, what?
His key point was brilliantly simple. He was merely fulfilling a divine decree. He wasn't acting out of personal greed or malice towards Artemis or her hind. He had no intention of disrespecting her. He framed it as a terrible necessity within his divinely ordered penance. He was basically caught between Eurystheus' command, backed by Hera's influence, and the hard place of offending Artemis.
And somehow, this worked. Artemis, known for her temper, actually listened.
It seems so. The sources describe her expression slowly softening from anger to understanding. She wasn't swayed by flattery or fear, but by the genuine tragedy of his situation, his sincerity, his acknowledgement of his tragic circumstances. She recognized the awful hand he'd been dealt by fate and her stepmother Hera. She saw his action not as deliberate insult, but as this necessary, painful step on his path to atonement, a path the gods themselves had set him on.
Wow. So she showed mercy, but it wasn't unconditional, was it?
No, definitely not a free pass.
Right.
She allowed him to take the hind back to Mycenae to show Eurystheus. But, and this was a strict condition, he had to promise to truly return it immediately afterward.
Immediately.
Immediately. This was a test of his integrity, a sacred promise made directly to the goddess who had just spared him. He had to prove he'd keep his word and not try to keep the hind.
Okay. So he navigated the divine fury, made a sacred promise, and now he heads back to Mycenae, carrying this wounded but living miracle to present it to King Eurystheus.
Imagine that arrival. Hercules, probably looking like he's been through the ringer after a year of chasing, carrying this stunning injured creature, gold antlers, bronze hooves, bull-sized. Eurystheus' reaction, totally in character.
What did he do?
The sources say, astonished and terrified. Astonished that Hercules actually pulled it off against all odds, against divine protection, and terrified probably of the creature itself, maybe sensing its power, its sacredness, maybe even terrified of the divine fallout of having it there in his palace.
But being Eurystheus, he couldn't just leave it at that, could he? The cowardly king?
No. Despite the fear, That greed, that desire to possess this unique God-touched thing kicks in immediately. Sources say he was trying to claim the hind for his own, reaching out, wanting to grab it, take physical possession, proof of the labor, maybe a personal trophy.
Right, and this is the moment of truth for Hercules. He has to show it to Eurystheus to complete the labor, technically. But he promised Artemis he'd return it immediately after showing it. How does he square that circle?
This is where the cleverness comes in. He's not just strong, not just patient. He's smart. He remembers that promise to Artemis. He knows he absolutely cannot let Eurystheus keep the hind. Breaking his word to the goddess who just showed him mercy, that would invite her wrath all over again, maybe worse this time.
So what was his move? It sounds impossible.
It was beautifully simple. Subtle defiance that honored his promise and totally outfoxed the king. As Eurystheus reached out, ready to grab the hind, Hercules just let go.
He released it, just like that.
Just release it, knowing full well the nature of the creature.
Of course, a creature that wild, that fast, that connected to Artemis in the wilderness. It wouldn't hang around in Eurystheus' court for a second.
Exactly. He knew it would instantly flee back to Artemis, back to its true home, its protector, gone in a flash.
Leaving Eurystheus grasping at air. That's brilliant and the perfect understated way to handle it.
And as the hind bolts, leaving the king probably sputtering and astonished, Hercules calmly offers his explanation. He basically tells Eurystheus, well, you weren't fast enough to grab it.
Ha, which was technically true.
Perfectly true. Eurystheus hadn't seized it. But it completely shifts the blame, framing the king's failure to possess the hind as his own lack of speed or decisiveness. Hercules fulfilled the letter of the command. He brought it back, he showed it, but used the king's own nature against him to keep his promise.
It's just a fantastic moment. Cleverness, integrity, all wrapped up. And the final outcome is a win on all fronts for Hercules, isn't it?
Pretty much. The hind gets away, safely returned to its divine mistress, Artemis. Hercules fulfilled his promise. He completed the labor, captured it, presented it. He did it without permanent harm, without fatally offending the gods, and he completely frustrated Eurystheus in the process. It was a victory of wit, piety, and endurance, not just strength.
This deep dive really underscores how different this labor was. It wasn't the Nemean lion, brute force, not the Hydra, strategic battle dealing with regeneration.
No, it tested and showcased a completely different set of virtues. Things we might not immediately associate with Hercules. Patience, that year-long chase. Perseverance, just refusing to quit. Respect for the divine, his piety, his honesty with Artemis and Apollo, keeping his promise. And that final move with Eurystheus' cunning, cleverness.
Looking at the bigger picture of his legend, this labor feels crucial for showing he was more than just the muscle.
It absolutely broadens his heroic persona. It proves he wasn't only about physical power, he was capable of delicate tasks, that precise arrow shot. He showed unwavering pursuit beyond any quick fight, and he managed respectful diplomacy even with enraged goddesses, talking his way out of a potentially fatal divine encounter using humility and truth.
It really did broaden him beyond mere strength. Showed he could handle complex challenges requiring subtlety, endurance, integrity, intelligence, all alongside the power.
And there's symbolism here too, isn't there? The hind itself. This wild, untamed beauty, sacred, inviolable. It represents the sanctity of the wilderness, maybe? Those parts of the world belonging to the gods that mortals should respect?
And Hercules' success wasn't crushing it, but mastering it briefly without destroying its essence and then letting it return.
Exactly. You can interpret that as reflecting a kind of harmony with nature, or at least a deeper understanding that goes beyond just using raw power. His ability to subdue it through patience, skill, reverence, not just force, and then return it, it suggests a respect for the natural and divine order.
It feels like a triumph not just over a beast, which is the usual Hercules story, but over the challenge of mastery without destruction. That feels rare, profound even, a different kind of victory.
And digging into those source details is fascinating too, like the physical description of female deer with antlers. Highly unusual for deer around the Mediterranean.
Right, you mentioned that earlier.
Well, it led some scholars, like Sir William Ridgway, to make an interesting argument. He connected that detail, female with antlers, with the mention of the chase reaching Hyperborea, the far north. Reindeer. Female reindeer do typically have antlers. So the combination of Hyperborea, far north, and a female deer with antlers, it could suggest a very old, maybe even non-Greek element embedded in the myth, perhaps a distorted memory or knowledge of northern animals, like reindeer, woven into the story.
That's fascinating. A possible echo of distant lands and different fauna.
It's a compelling idea anyway.
Yeah.
Adds another layer to just how strange and special this hind was and how vast the chase felt.
Hmm.
And it's also worth remembering, like you said, the sources themselves vary slightly. Poets like Pindar and Euripides, mythographers like Apollodorus, they retold it over centuries. They even use different words for the creature sometimes do. Hind, deer, hart, stag, beast. It shows how myths evolve and get interpreted. Different facets may be emphasized in different tellings.
So wrapping this up, the Ceryneian Hind labor, definitely not your typical Hercules task. A year-long chase, a sacred quarry, facing down angry gods, that clever resolution.
And it really revealed these crucial sides of Hercules we might overlook. His incredible patience, his perseverance, that deep respect for the divine, and his unexpected cunning and integrity.
Yeah, this deep dive really does challenge that simple image of Hercules as just the strong man. It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What does this myth tell us about the different kinds of challenges we face and the different virtues, sometimes wit, patience, respect, not just force that real heroism might require?
That's a great question to leave people with. Heroism isn't just one thing, is it? It's not just about physical power. It's also about endurance, humility, integrity, intelligence, finding a way through impossible situations.
Hmm.
And maybe myths like this, preserved across all these ancient sources, keep surprising us because they show that complexity. They test not just power, but character, and our respect for the world, wild, sacred, and common.